Hey everybody, and welcome to Healthy Living. I'm Chef AJ, and my guest today is registered dietitian Brenda Davis. She is the co-author of 9 vegetarian and vegan nutrition classics with over 750,000, that's 750,000 copies in print, and in 10 languages, including her latest award winners, Becoming Vegan, Comprehensive, and Express editions. Here's one of them. Brenda is the lead dietitian in a diabetes research project in the Marshall Islands and a past chair of the Vegetarian Nutrition Dietetic Practice Group of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics and a Vegetarian Hall of Fame inductee. Please welcome my friend and someone I really look up to in this field, Brenda Davis. Thank you so much for taking your time to talk to my viewers and yours.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, AJ.
Of course.
It's a privilege to be here.
Anytime I talk to you, it's a good time because I look up to you so much. I'm like tongue-tied because I love how you don't just promote a vegan diet for health reasons, but you always make sure that in every presentation you give, you talk about how it also needs to be ecologically sustainable, environmentally sustainable, and ethically justifiable. And not all the health professionals do that. So thank you for including the environment and the animals in your circle of compassion when you do your work.
It's why we do what we do. Really.
Absolutely. And you do it beautifully. I have never seen anyone so fit. I could not believe you in the boot camp run by John Pierre. I've never seen anybody run as fast, do as many. You can do your age in push-ups, and you're older than me. I can't do one push-up. So it's incredible how I've seen you do that in a dress at conferences. So you're not only incredibly beautiful and intelligent, but you are really, truly very, very fit. So you really, and if people wonder about the efficacy of a vegan diet, then I just say, look at Brenda Davis. So I really encourage people, if this is their first time being exposed to you, to look on YouTube because a lot of your lectures are there and they're wonderful. And I actually reviewed a few of them in preparation for this interview. So I thought it might be fun just to talk about some of the myths that both of us hear, you, I'm sure, in your work, and me just as a non-health professional, but for someone who's been vegan for 40 years, that we hear over and over. And I know you could probably take an hour to answer each of them scientifically, but maybe just we'll do a few and just kind of say what the answer is for these myths that those of us that have been doing this a long time hear over and over. And one of them I hear is that humans were designed to eat meat. I mean, that's why we have canine teeth. And a lot of people say, I feel better when I eat meat. And I really feel if I eat a plant-based or vegan diet, I'm going to be missing something. So aren't there people out there, aren't there some of us that just, we really need meat to thrive?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we all get asked where do you get your protein. Mm-hmm. I think the most common question that vegetarians or vegans get asked. Mm-hmm. And first of all, I don't think if you really look at the science, there is no evidence that humans were designed to eat meat. If you look at carnivorous animals, we are very different from carnivorous animals. We're essentially there are arguments whether we're herbivores or omnivores and we eat whatever we can get. But I think our digestive tracts are much more herbivorous than carnivorous, that's for sure. But one of the things that I think people need to think about when they think about protein is really a whole bunch of amino acids. And all of these amino acids are actually created by plants. They're made by plants. It makes no sense to think we can't get them from plants. It's where they come from. So if we get them from meat, the animal got these amino acids either directly or indirectly from plants. Directly by eating the plants or indirectly by eating animals that eat the plants.
Right.
And so it makes no sense. So people that say they don't feel well once they eliminate meat completely, there are probably two possible reasons. One being that our bodies can take time to adjust to not eating meat because there are certain nutrients that are preformed in meat, like carnitine and taurine and so on, that there are enzymes in our bodies that make these compounds, but when you don't have to make them for decades and decades, you may downregulate or not make as many of those enzymes. And so it may take your body some time to adjust to not eating those things. And so for some people, a slower transition towards a completely plant-based diet works better physiologically. The second reason is that often what people do when they switch to plant-based is they kind of go from meat and potatoes to pasta and bagels.
Yeah.
You know, the diet isn't nutrient rich. They need to be replacing that meat with some plant foods that provide comparable nutrients. So they get their iron and their zinc and their protein. And of course, the most concentrated sources of those nutrients that we would normally, you know, if we were omnivorous, get from animals is legumes. And you get little bits of them from all plant foods. People are shocked to learn that, you know, oats are 17% of calories from protein. People need maybe 10 or 15 at most. And so almost all plant foods contain in that range. The only exceptions are fruits and really starchy vegetables may have slightly less. But if you eat enough calories and you eat a variety of plant foods, it's really not an issue. It's actually challenging to design a diet that's too low in protein. So protein is not the issue a lot of people think it is, and generally most people in our society probably end up eating too much protein. Right. But I do think that if people are struggling, it can really help to have someone who's skilled, who knows how to create, adequate meals to help them to do that. Because you can't just switch from an omnivorous diet to a pasta and bagel or whatever kind of diet and think that it will automatically be adequate.
Right. And I see that happen a lot, especially when people become vegan for ethical reasons, is that, yes, they stop eating meat and dairy, but now they're just eating a diet of 100% vegan junk food, and then often they don't feel well or get sick. But from what I understand, you're saying that for some people, it just takes a little bit longer and they need to give it time and really maybe work with somebody like yourself or a professional that can devise a really healthy version of a plant-based diet.
Yeah, and to be honest, AJ, that's why we wrote these books. Yeah. You know, the Becoming Vegan Comprehensive and Express is we wanted to make sure that the diet was essentially foolproof, that they, you know, we provide every guideline answer, every question you could possibly have about creating a plant-based diet. And the reason that I feel so strongly about that is, to me, a failed vegan is exhibit number one for why people are justified eating meat.
Absolutely.
And so I think it's really important that people get it right. And I don't ever want to see a failed vegan child, you know? So we talk about every stage of the life cycle, and we know, you know, if you look at the position paper 2016 from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics on vegetarian diets, it's very clear. At every stage of the life cycle, this way of eating is absolutely adequate when the diet is appropriately planned. So these books are about how to make that happen.
Yeah, and they really are, like you say, comprehensive. And the index alone, you know, it almost should be called the Vegan Bible, because if you didn't want to read the whole book, you could just look at the index and like breastfeeding or something that you wanted to know the answer to. So
yeah,
I have
the Express.
I actually have both. I actually have both. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
They're
and then
fantastic.
Here's what the comprehensive looks like. They're similar.
The comprehensive, Brenda, turn it by the side and show how thick the comprehensive version is. That is really, that's a thick book. That is,
it's about twice the size of the Express, so that for people that want all the references, and for health professionals or people that are just nutrition nerds or whatever that want more information, it
really is. When people say, what book should I buy, that's the one, because there's no question on plant-based nutrition that you didn't thoroughly and thoughtfully answer. So thank you so much, because like you say, a failed vegan it's hard, especially like when you see these celebrities and then, well, it didn't work for me, but you don't really know what version of the diet they did that didn't work for them. Yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So then we talked about protein. You know, if I had a nickel for every time somebody said in 40 years, you know, where do you get your protein? I'd be rich. Now I usually just say human flesh from people like you that ask me that annoying question. But again, we hear about dairy. Well, where are we going to get our, people have these buzzwords that they focus on, and, dairy, calcium, meat, protein. Okay, well, I can understand not eating meat because some people are actually vegetarians instead of vegans, but they go, but we have to have dairy for calcium. And, especially if we have children, we can't raise a child without dairy. What say you to there?
Well, I've been not as long as you, AJ, but I've been pretty close to vegan or completely vegan for almost 30 years.
Wow.
And I actually, my physician was concerned about my bone density because my mom had osteoporosis, and by the time she was 50, I'm a slim, light female. I'm at higher risk to start with because of the family history and so forth. And my doctor said, you haven't eaten dairy for like 20 whatever years
Wow.
it was. He said, I think we need to do, the DEXA scan, the big bone scan, and just check. And I remember going in to see him, and he opened my chart to get the results of all my tests, and his jaw just dropped. He said, your bone density is so high, they had to make an arrow at the top of the chart. You are off the charts, 2.5 standard deviations above norm for your age. For some bones, and 2 standard deviations for others. But he said we don't see this very often. And so he was shocked because he thought that not consuming dairy would be an issue. But what we really know is that, animals produce milk to support the growth of their offspring and the bone development of their offspring and so forth. And so, whether it's cow's milk or moose milk or deer milk or cat's milk or dog's milk or whatever, they all contain a lot of calcium. It's what they are. They're made to help, the bone formation of this, whatever species it is. Humans, it's the same thing. Our milk has a fair bit of calcium in it. But that doesn't make cow's milk or moose milk or deer milk or any other milk an essential food for humans. There are actually many people around the world that cow's milk, the dairy, is not a traditional food for, and they don't have any less, I should say they don't have any osteoporosis problems to near the extent that we do. If you look at the people that have the strongest bones in the world, the people in Africa that are consuming a fairly small amount of calcium, but calcium deficient, I guess I should say bone density or your bone strength is really a product of many factors. Your vitamin D, your exercise, your weight-bearing exercise, all sorts of nutrients from magnesium and potassium to vitamin C and zinc, and there are just so many nutrients that play a role in helping to grow and maintain strong bones. Calcium is one of them. And I think it's a mistake for people to say calcium is not important. I don't have to worry about it. I can just eat whatever and I'll get plenty of calcium. Because there are studies that show that vegans who get less than 525 milligrams of calcium a day actually have about 30% more higher risk of fractures than do omnivores. And so we do need to make sure that we've got a source of calcium, but there are so many great sources of calcium other than cow's milk. So for myself, I rely on dark green leafy vegetables. I use some fortified non-dairy milks. I love to eat tofu and things like that. I incorporate all sorts of, but we get little bits of calcium from legumes. We get little bits of calcium from nuts and seeds and from fruits and vegetables and so on. And so if we, include a good mix and we include the nutrients that help with the absorption of calcium and not too many of the inhibitors of absorption, we can design a diet that supports bone health probably better than what a diet containing dairy would do. And so my feeling is when you look at, you say, we absolutely need the milk of cows. To me, it defies rationality to assume that human beings would require the milk of another species for our survival. It would have been, the biggest blunder of nature. Imagine if dogs needed cat's milk, and it just. I mean, really think about it from a common sense perspective.
I think it's the craziest thing ever. Like, I understand our ancestors did eat some meat, and the meat was far different than today, and it usually, like, if a bird dropped dead, and it was much higher in protein and lower in fat. But people existed before they drank cow's milk for a very, very long time. And like you say, to assume that our survival as a species is dependent on the lactation fluid of a bovine, to me, it's a triumph of marketing over science, and really, of all the arguments, to me, it's the craziest thing, especially since so many people just are already lactose intolerant. Myself being, Jewish ethnicity, most African Americans and Asians and Latinos. I mean, most of the world can't even digest cow's milk, and yet people are saying this is like the most important food that, and so a lot of people will say, okay, well, I understand, we don't need it, but you certainly can't raise a baby or a child without it. That's criminal, right?
Yeah. No, I love what you just said, AJ. You are so right on. It is, definitely marketing over science. There's no question. And also, I love what you said about different ethnicities, because when you look at our food guides, dairy having its own category, being one of the essential food groups, it's racist. It's absolutely racist.
It is.
We're not considering the needs and the physiology of people from different parts of the world. And I have to say, I'm tremendously proud at this moment to be a Canadian, because we are revamping our food guide. And our dairy industry is absolutely up in arms because our Health Canada is thinking of and very seriously considering removing dairy as an essential food group.
That's amazing.
So it's amazing.
I love it. I love how you said that, insisting that dairy be in the food pyramid is racist. Has Dr. Barnard or PCRM ever sued the USDA or whoever designs that food pyramid for that? Because I've never heard it phrased that way, but you're right. It really is racist to assume that all people need to include a food that most people are basically allergic to.
Yeah, exactly. And so
I love
it, to me, they can leave it in, but as not as an essential food group, as a choice within all of these choices, but that there's so many other, alternatives that could be selected as a source of whatever nutrients they're using dairy for. It's not an essential food. Never has been, never will be.
So raising a child dairy-free, I mean, little babies probably aren't going to eat steamed kale. How do you make sure that if you have a baby, they are going to get enough of these essential nutrients like calcium?
Yeah, and the key really is to learn about, and we're not taught about the calcium sources in the diet. And so one of the things that I would suggest people do is to include some fortified non-dairy alternatives. So it could be, soy milk or almond milk. The only problem with some of the milks is they are extremely low in protein. And for some children, that's a pretty important source of protein, is their milk replacement, whatever you want to call it. And so in that case, one of the things that I do is I actually blend in hemp seeds into almond milk.
Nice.
And that gives a boost of not only protein, but also essential fatty acids and a lot of trace minerals. Soy milk really is the most nutritious of the non-dairy milks in terms of the vitamins, minerals, protein, and all of that. So that's one, just one serving is 300 milligrams calcium right there. 2 servings is 600. And then it's easy from there. So remember that every single thing practically in the plant-based diet has some calcium. So you can look at legumes and say, well, which ones are the richest sources? And you'll see some of the white beans and black beans have more than, say, chickpeas or whatever. And so you can mix things up a bit to include the richer sources. You can see that, almonds and sesame seeds have more than walnuts and, whatever, poppy seeds or whatever. Well, poppy seeds are actually pretty high, actually. And chia seeds are remarkably high, too. So there's, you just learn a little bit like that. And then also, even in the greens, so spinach, if you look it up, it's really high in calcium. but it's got a lot of oxalic acid, so you don't absorb the calcium from spinach very well. But other greens, like the low oxalate greens, like kale and broccoli and almost all the Chinese greens, and these have very highly available calcium. And it's true, like you say, children may not eat huge amounts, but I can tell you, it depends on how they're raised. I can remember, and I'm using the bad example of spinach, but I can remember when my daughter was 9 years old, she came upstairs just before bed and said, "Mom, can I have a bedtime snack?" And I said, "Sure." She started looking in the fridge. What am I going to have? And she saw that a bunch of spinach, and she said, "Oh, we have spinach. Could I make some spinach?" And I said, "Oh, sure, honey." And she steamed the spinach and with garlic, and she was squeezing lemon on top and sitting down to this plate of spinach. And my son walks, he's 6 years old, he walks up the stairs and he goes, "Huh, is that spinach?" And she said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, is there any more?" And she said, "No, I'm eating the last batch." And he burst into tears. If you get excited about these foods, the dark greens, she could have just as well been doing kale. This was, 20-some years ago, so it wasn't quite as popular. But children, they get excited about it too. And I can remember preparing I took out a head of broccoli and I was going to prepare it for dinner, and I turned around, my broccoli was gone, the whole head. And I thought I was losing my mind. I looked in the sink, I looked in the fridge, I looked everywhere. I finally found my head of broccoli behind the couch. My son was eating it. He'd literally taken it off the couch. He was 2 years old. He was eating the whole thing. And so I just think we need to approach vegetables and fruits with a little more enthusiasm than a lot of people do. Children will eat this stuff. They really will. And, I can remember my daughter saying, I have not found a kid yet that doesn't love kale chips. She says, "I always make kale chips as a treat." And she has a little one, and, all the little ones, friends and whatever come over. And she said, they love kale chips. So there's a fantastic way to serve kale to children. There are all sorts of ways of doing it. So I think we need to be creative.
Right. And I think if they're raised eating vegetables and the parents are eating vegetables and they're not offered other crap like soda and
that's right,
macaroni and cheese, they will eat it. I remember Dr. Alan Goldhammer, his son Gar, who's I believe 30 years old now, he was brought up that if he was a good boy, he would get Brussels sprouts, not cookies. And guess what his favorite food is? It's Brussels sprouts. So how do you suggest somebody talk to their doctor, though? Because I've heard people that are vegans, even ethical vegans, say that their doctor insists that now that they're pregnant, though, they have to eat meat, and that, and that when their baby's born, I mean, can you just give this book to the doc? Will the doctor read it? That's the hard thing. People have a hard time,
Yeah. No, what I would say, AJ, is the easiest thing. The book is too much for most doctors. They don't have time to read that. So what I would suggest is go on to the American or the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics website, or just type in vegetarian or position on vegetarian nutrition 2016.
Wow.
And the paper's free online. It will come up. It is written for health professionals. It's written by the largest nutrition organization on the planet. They are very well respected, and it spells it out in black and white that during pregnancy, lactation, infancy, childhood, adolescence, for athletes, it spells it out that vegan diets are absolutely safe and adequate. And I can tell you that there is no way that the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics would put their stamp of approval on that if there was not very good evidence. Everything in the position paper has to be evidence-based. So we have very good evidence that that's the case. Yeah, and that's something that a physician would look at and say.
That's actually very helpful. Thank you, Brenda. I wrote that down because I think I'm just going to make lots of copies. And when people ask me, I think it's going to be a lot easier than arguing. We're like, well, why don't you read this paper and then we'll talk. That's great. Yeah. So you said your bone density score was off the charts. It was so high it couldn't be even measured practically. But some people are diagnosed, even vegans, with osteoporosis. Is it too late, or can can it be reversed or can it be improved? And because I get that question a lot, especially even with some men. So what do you say about that?
Yeah, and definitely there are a lot of vegans that have poor bone density. As a matter of fact, in the Epic Oxford study, vegans had 30% higher risk of bone fracture than non-vegans, but only the vegans that were getting less than 525 milligrams of calcium a day. But about half of them were, at that level. I think it was 45% of them, and 76% were below 725 or something milligrams a day. So people aren't really learning. When you think about our nutrition education in sort of North America, we teach people how to get calcium and by eating dairy. We don't teach them how to get calcium by eating plant foods. And so a lot of people don't know. And so one of the things that I say to people who really already do have osteoporosis or who have osteopenia, which is sort of the step before osteoporosis, is that you need to give your bones a signal that they need to be strong. And the way you do that, the best way, bar none, is exercise.
Right.
So, and I think that's why my bone density was so high. I mean, I was getting enough of the nutrients I needed, but also to do that weight-bearing exercise, your body needs to know it has to keep those bones strong. That's the signal. That keeps your bones building and rebuilding appropriately. So exercise is not, to me, it's not an option, it's an imperative if you want to achieve optimal health. You can't achieve optimal health if you don't incorporate exercise. And in this day and age, it's even more important because there was a time, once upon a time, where we didn't have to think about exercise because exercise was built into everything we did. We had to work physically hard all the time. So we got this sort of continuous physical activity during our day. Now we sit at a computer all day, like I do. And so I know I have to make time to get that physical activity in because I want to stay strong and healthy. And then people need to think about, so they need to think about fitness, but they also need to think about where is the calcium coming from and get those higher calcium plant foods in. They need to think about vitamin D because, where you live, it's not as much of an issue. If you get exposed to sunshine, you can get enough vitamin D. But where I live, well, we don't make vitamin D between probably October and March. So I'm out of luck if I don't take a vitamin D supplement or get, some people say just go to Hawaii. Well, not everybody's rich enough to go to Hawaii. We have to be reasonable and give guidelines that everybody can do. And so I would say, some people need to take a vitamin D supplement. Some people, we need to think about, getting enough potassium, getting enough magnesium, getting enough of all of these nutrients that support bone health. So vitamin A and vitamin C and all of these nutrients, which means a balanced diet and not eating a lot of processed junk foods. That's the key because a lot of these, when you think about the sort of nutrient density of food, you get very little nutrition. You know all about this, AJ. You get so little nutrition from these ultra-processed foods. We need to make our calories count, and that will help our bones as well.
Right. Because in the Western medicine world, in the non-plant-based, if you're diagnosed with osteopenia or osteoporosis, they want you to take calcium supplements and they want you to often take medication or whatever that shot is. And they don't even mention really eating the way we eat or exercise as a possible way to improve it at all.
Yeah, well, I've actually seen people who have improved their bone density tremendously by exercise. Where you think as you get older, your bone density goes down, but their bone density actually goes up even after menopause,
wow.
Which is amazing. So it's totally possible, but the people that I've seen the greatest success with that in is people who have really upped their exercise.
So what are we talking, like running a marathon or like what do you do and what do you recommend for osteoporosis prevention and even improvement? How much and what kind?
Yeah, and I mean, obviously if you're running marathons, you're getting great, lower body weight-bearing exercise. To be honest with you, I am cautious about over exercise, because I think that for some people what they end up doing is they cause injuries and then they can't do much of anything. And so I think I personally, I like to cross train. I like to do a lot of different activities. If I get an injury, I always have something I can fall back on. I can swim, or I can do biking or whatever. There's usually something that you can do. So I think it's important to do a variety of exercises, and I think it's important to do not just cardio, but also some strength training and some flexibility exercise for sort of optimal health of bones and everything else. So I would say, so just to give you an example, I might do in a typical day an hour of some sort of cardio-like exercise or strength training, and then an hour of yoga or something like that. So I might do a couple of hours, but I'm sitting most of the day, so I need a couple of hours.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll go, in the summertime especially, I'll go for a little run in the morning just to get my blood flowing and to be outside, and then I'll do my, the rest of the activity at night. But I always try, balanced over the week to get all three types of physical activity. The strength is really important for the bones, but cardiovascular is as well. And you can, a lot of cardiovascular exercise is weight bearing, so it's great. Not all of it is, but a lot.
Right. I find that the cardio is so much easier, the walking and the spinning, than the weights. That's just, I just don't know. I don't know why. But I like what you say. Don't think of it as an option. Think of it as imperative. I like the way you said that. That's really great. One of the things
what, AJ, I just want to tell you that your picture on my computer is kind of going in slow motion. And I'm not sure if that might be happening at your end as well.
It's not happening on my end, so I think
good.
It could be it could be your internet speed, but thank you for saying that, because you're looking perfect. I think it's going to be good. I know we had some sound glitches. So earlier you mentioned oxalates, and one of the things I hear from people is they can't eat particular kinds of vegetables because they're too high in oxalates, or maybe they're on some kind of medication like blood thinners. But I always thought you change your medicine, you should be able to eat everything on a plant-based diet, or is that incorrect? Do they need to watch those things?
Yeah, so some people, like you say, on blood thinners, I think that one is just so ridiculous, because the more greens you eat, the less blood thinners you'll need.
Right.
Although, greens contain vitamin K, and vitamin K is coagulant. So it can act against anticoagulants. So often the doctor just cares about consistency of greens. So if you eat a cup or two of greens a day, they'll up your Coumadin or whatever it is, so that, it balances, everything balances out. But what I think would be more the case is if you start eating more plant-based whole foods kind of diet, you'll need less of your, medication, and possibly none at all. So I think people need to be careful about that. But certainly, rather than eating less greens, you're better off taking a little more of the medication than eating less greens, because the greens are so important.
Right.
But in the end, I think you'd be taking less medication, not more, because you just wouldn't need it if you're eating healthful.
Right. Absolutely.
And then with the oxalates, of course, there are some people that are hypersensitive to oxalates, and so in the case of those individuals, and I think most people can handle a reasonable amount of oxalates, but for people that really are very sensitive, get a lot of kidney stones, I would say, do everything that you can, like drinking a lot and having, the lemon and lime in your water, and just all of those little tricks before you really try and get rid of oxalates. And if all else fails, then you can start choosing the lower oxalate greens and so on and so forth. You can still have some, of course, but you might choose kale over spinach, for example.
Mm-hmm. I hear from a lot of people, and even a lot of young people, that would like to make a career in the plant-based world, and they say, well, should I become a dietitian like Brenda Davis? And what you know about plant-based nutrition, you didn't learn that in dietetic school, right? This is something you had to learn on your own. And would you advise somebody starting out today, to go that route, because I can probably count all the wonderful plant-based dietitians probably on two hands. And it seems like if you have a traditional hospital job, you're not going to be, doing plant-based nutrition. So what do you say about that? And what can you like just start a dietetics school, like an RD program for just plant-based that people could go to? Because that would be amazing.
Well, AJ, what I say to people who ask me about going into this career is please just do it. The more strong plant-based voices we have in the dietetic realm, the more we're going to change from within, and we're going to start affecting some serious change. And we already are. People would be shocked. There are probably 1,500 members of the vegetarian practice group in the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. I get emails on a regular basis from people, asking about doing a dietetics program. And the reason that I encourage them to do that, even though it's like a chef, wanting that traditional training, they'll go through a regular kind of program to get that, but then they can branch out on their own and do their own thing and do amazing work. It's in dietetics. The reason you want to do dietetics is because you become, within the mainstream scientific world, you become a credible voice. Mm-hmm. You don't get that mainstream training, you'll never speak to doctors. You'll never be invited to speak at a medical or dietetic conference anywhere. So, I can remember back I was trained, I started, my training for nutrition in the 70s, graduated in the early 80s, and I can remember I didn't learn much about plant-based nutrition back then. But things are changing. Even within sort of the mainstream schools, the minds are opening. And they're opening because people are demanding that they open. We get enough trained people, we're going to hit the tipping point. We are. And I love to speak to dietitians. I love to encourage young dietitians because we're supposed to be the voices of nutrition. We want those people to be qualified. And don't be scared. Be strong. Have that position paper handy. If you have a professor that says something that's not accurate, share that information with them. And AJ, I can remember when I first sort of made that transition to a completely vegan diet, and I had been a dietitian for a while, and I was scared because I didn't know if there were any other vegan dietitians on the planet. I didn't know if I would continue to be accepted within my profession. I can remember thinking, I'm going to just be ousted. How can I be a dietitian when I don't promote dairy products? It's part of our basic nutrition education materials. It's what we use to educate people. So I didn't know where I was going to fit. And I can remember thinking, well, maybe I could be a lawyer. I can remember thinking about what other things I could do. And then I thought to myself, if everybody who gets it, who really understands the huge significance of our food choices for the planet, for the animals, for our health, if everybody who gets it just leaves, nothing will ever change. And so I can remember thinking, I need to have the courage to stand up for what I believe in and to speak with confidence. And so what I decided to do was make sure that I knew my stuff. Instead of reading Chatelaine or whatever it is before bed, I would read, or Vogue magazine or whatever, I would read, nutrition recommendations for Canadians or the World Health Organization's, 1990 papers on diet and disease, or I would just immerse myself in that stuff so that I could speak with some sense about these issues.
Do you think that there'll be a time where dietetics school will actually start teaching plant-based nutrition as part of the curriculum?
Oh, absolutely. I have no doubt whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I just came from Lithuania earlier this year, where I was at a university where they have started a lifestyle medicine program, master's program, and they've got a lifestyle medicine component of their medical school, and it's plant-based. The
That's
lifestyle
amazing.
medicine master's is plant-based. The lifestyle medicine is plant-based, and it's really starting to happen. We're just going to see more and more of it. It's a wonderful thing. And we're seeing more of it because people aren't backing down. They're saying, I'm going to do this.
That is fantastic. So this is something I've always wanted to ask you and some of the other plant-based dietitians. How do you address, there's some actual vegan dietitians that believe that the China study is faulty research and that we should be vegan just for ethical reasons, not for health reasons, and that if we tell vegans they shouldn't eat oil, we're making it harder for people to become vegan. And I have my opinion, I'm happy to give it, but I'm curious, as you, somebody who's does it from all three, sides of the equation, health, ethics, and environment. How do you feel about that? Because I'm going to let you talk first, and then I'll tell you my opinion.
Yeah, well, I have some mixed feelings because I think that there are some individuals for whom doing a sort of a healthy Mediterranean style plant-based diet, whatever, where they are including some of these foods that may not be ideal for disease reversal. They can have little bits and do really well, actually, and be wonderful athletes. And I do think saying, in some cases, eliminating whole plant foods that are healthy but higher in fat, that it may make it more difficult. Well, one of the hardest things for people is to give up cheese, but hey, if I can have cashew cheese, that's going to make it easier. We don't want to take those out, for people that it's a perfectly reasonable option for. And so I totally understand that line of thinking. I think that the evidence that plant-based diets are very, very useful therapeutic tools. That people who eat plant-based have lower rates of heart disease, diabetes, cancer, so forth. I think that evidence is actually really strong. It wasn't so strong 10 years ago. It's actually really quite strong today. We have some really good research showing really quite amazing differences. So vegans having 75% less hypertension than omnivores, than similar health conscious omnivores, and vegetarians having, I think, 55% less, and having 62 vegans having 62% less diabetes than the general population, then similar health conscious non-vegetarians having 16 to 19% less cancers than similar health conscious non-vegetarians. Having, vegan men having, I think it's 55% less ischemic heart disease and 43 or whatever percent less cardiovascular disease. So we're seeing these numbers, and we're seeing them not just in North America, but in Europe. We're seeing them in Taiwan. There's a research group now that they're getting very, very similar numbers. And so I don't think that's that debatable anymore. We have good evidence that plant-based diets not only can be nutritionally adequate, but actually can provide significant health benefits and reduce risk of chronic disease. So I do get the concern about saying, there's only one way of doing this, and because for some people who are burning 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day, it's easier for them. They meet their nutrition requirements on 3,000 or 2,000 calories to say, well, I'll have a little bit of, a higher fat, whatever, with this. And it makes it easier for them to do, and they're burning it all off anyway, and they can do very, very well. So to allow for that makes some sense. But I think we need to be very cautious about saying that it's only about animal rights. It's not. It's about health, and it's about the environment, and it's about all of those things.
All right. I just got back from speaking at a Veg Fest, and there was literally, with all the food vendors, not one thing that I could eat that I would consider food. And I wrote a book called Unprocessed 7 years ago, and I'm against processed food, whether it's produced by a wonderful ethical vegan company or craft, because I just don't think processed food is food. And I was a junk food vegan for 26 of the 40 years, weighing almost 200 pounds with the beginning of cancer, no meat or dairy. So don't tell me that these foods are are healthy for you, because they're not. And I see too many vegans that are ethical vegans now that are sick or really overweight. And I'm not talking about it from a an aesthetic standpoint, but that being this overweight is causing them some disease or some harm. And so I think if you really cared about animals, you'd want to be as healthy as possible and look like you and be a spokesperson like that, because I think it's much more enrolling for people when the advocates, and I'm not saying you got to be skinny, that's not what I'm saying, but being healthy. And I think when I know vegans who literally eat 100% of their calories from vegan junk food, which didn't even exist 40 years ago when I became vegan. And I think there are consequences. And I can tell you, I've known a lot of vegans now that have died of cancer, of heart disease and of diabetes. So to say that there's no impact on health is, I don't really know. Yeah.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I mean, when you think about, there's almost every junk food there's a vegan version of. Mm-hmm. And, in some ways it's great that people have fewer excuses to be vegan, and they're saving a lot of animals, and it's better ecologically and so forth. But I think they need to put those foods into perspective, because they can be just as harmful as their omnivorous counterparts. And so we really need to recognize that. And I also completely agree that for many people, we're the only vegan they've ever met. They will judge vegan by how well we do. And if we blow it, we're, as I said before, exhibit number 1 for why they're justified in eating their meat and dairy. And so we want to be an example of health that's really powerful, that's too powerful for other people around us to ignore. We want to be the only person in our workplace that's not on medication, that's thriving in their 60s or 70s or whatever. And we want people to say, wow, I wonder why? What are they eating? Maybe there's something to that thing. Rather than you being the person that has no energy and who's just, surviving. We need to do better than that.
Absolutely. And I love one of the talks you give, and you gave it at the Plantrition Conference, about the paleo diet. That's one of the funnest and best talks, because you really debunk that whole idea that we are supposed to eat that diet.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I know you had mentioned to me about ketogenic, and there are all of these diets that are, very, very animal food centered, and the paleo diet is probably one of the better of the works. I mean, some people doing paleo are really doing fairly high plants. They eat, just a wide variety of plants, and then very small servings or smaller servings of very low, non-fatty kinds of fish or poultry or whatever it is. And they do a reasonable job, and they do fairly well with it. And then you get these diets like a ketogenic diet that is a diet that is, often 75% of calories from fat, 5% carbohydrate and maybe 20% protein or something like that. And people are doing that to lose weight. And it's very, very concerning to me. I think that one of the things that I think people need to start doing is to look beyond themselves. And so if you think about a Paleolithic diet, I love what David Katz said. He actually did the math to calculate, sort of the effect ecologically of people eating paleo. And he said if everyone on the planet ate a paleo diet today, we would need 15 planet Earths to sustain the current population. And the population isn't shrinking, it's growing. We are really facing quite an ecological disaster. And so people, we need to think beyond ourselves. Is what we're doing supporting this planet that we live on? What are we doing to animals? What we're doing to animals right now that we consume for food, to me is absolutely, positively unjustifiable. there is no excuse for humans doing what they do to these creatures. That, we think about the 70 billion that we slaughter every year. That's 10 times the human population. And it's not pretty. It's just deplorable, the conditions, and to me, it's like a horror movie, really. If people would only take the blinders off and see what we're doing completely unnecessarily. This is a choice. We don't have to do this. There are other ways, and we're learning about ways of if people really want to eat meat, and maybe it can be cultured. I don't know, but we don't need to do what we're doing today. And so I just think, you look at a ketogenic diet and you say, well, the purpose of this, I want to lose weight. Well, ketogenic diet is kind of like doing a starvation diet. When you're starving, your body ends up mobilizing its fat stores. So, and when you mobilize fat and turn it into fatty acids to use it for energy, you produce ketone bodies that are acids that you use for energy, and the brain can use these ketone bodies and such. So these ketones are acidic, so you end up with this sort of low-grade acidosis. Well, do you think this is good for your bones? Not a chance. You think it's good for your kidneys? Kidney stones, all of these things. This is not, just think about it this way. What we know about diet is that there are certain components of the diet that really support and promote health, like fiber, phytochemicals, and antioxidants, and plant sterols and stanols, and all of the things that support a healthy gut microbiota, and all the trace minerals and all of these nutrients, essential fatty acids, all of these things that are so important to health. And then there are a bunch of things that actually promote disease. We know increased risk of disease, and we think of, the harmful types of fats, of trans fats and saturated fats, and you think about all of these products of oxidation that are formed when you cook meat at high temperatures, like the heterocyclic amines and, the advanced glycation end products and acrylamide and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and then think of all of the toxic compounds that build up in the environment, all of the, the persistent organic pollutants, and, just the list goes on and on. And then you've got things like, carnitine that gets turned into TMAO, and you've got new 5-GC that's a pro-inflammatory molecule, and you've got all of these things. And when you look at what protects us and what harms us, a ketogenic diet essentially really it is completely elevates all of the things that kill us and reduces to a minimum the things that are most protective. You end up constipated, you end up all of these things. And what for? Weight loss? I mean, you can do chemotherapy to lose weight.
Absolutely.
It's just, to me, people have to focus on what do I need for health, not do I need to get skinny.
Right, but if we do what we do for health and follow a whole food plant-based diet like the way you recommend it, we actually do get thin, or
you get to reach a weight that is healthy.
Absolutely.
When you make healthy choices, you become healthy, and part of becoming healthy means being normal weight. I so often people say, especially my family, a lot of whom are overweight, oh, you're so thin. But in our culture right now, people who are normal weight are the minority. When in the United States, about 70% of the population is obese or overweight.
Right.
Normal weight people look skinny all of a sudden.
Absolutely.
It's ridiculous.
Absolutely.
And so there's no question. You make healthy lifestyle choices, you will reach a healthy body weight.
I love it. That is brilliant. Like you mentioned, most of the people that are doing these ketogenic diets, and probably all of them, are really not doing it for health. They're doing it for weight loss. But they're of the belief, as so many others are, and perhaps you can debunk this myth, is that carbs make you fat. Carbs are evil.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny. Carbs are evil if you take everything that's of benefit to human health out of them before you eat them. Mm-hmm. And that's most of the carbs that people are eating in our culture. You look at all the white flour products and the white sugar products and the beverages and so on. When you take everything of value to human health out of a food before consuming it, it's not going to contribute to health, and it can do a lot of harm. And when you think 90% of the carbs people eat come in those forms, you can understand why people have painted carbs with a black brush. But what they don't understand is carbohydrate-rich foods carbohydrates are really our best and most important source of calories. But we need to eat them as they come from nature in their whole form, so that they come packaged with fiber and phytochemicals and antioxidants and all of these anti-inflammatory compounds, and then they're protective to health. And there is no study that, to my knowledge, that has ever shown that carbohydrates from whole plant foods are harmful to human health. It's quite the contrary. The exact opposite is shown over and over and over again. And the easiest way, you can do an acid test. Just look at the people of the blue zones. We've got these 5 blue zones. You look at these populations, and the carbohydrate intakes in these populations ranges from, around 50% to around 80% of calories from carbohydrates. And so, these are the longest lived, healthiest people on the planet. If the longest lived, healthiest people on the planet can eat 60 or 70 or 80% of calories from carbs and still be the healthiest, longest lived people on the planet, then carbs probably aren't poison.
Right.
It's like a no-brainer.
Yeah. So one of the things I heard in the talk you gave is that legumes is one of the things all the populations had in common. And I know they're extremely healthy. However, I've come across a few people that actually are really allergic, anaphylactically born allergic to the whole legume family. So as a dietitian, what would you recommend that we eat instead when somebody really has to avoid that wonderful food group?
Yeah, and that's a really, really tough thing when you're allergic to legumes and you're wanting to eat whole food plant-based, because legumes, as you said, they were the one food that was consistently consumed among all of the blue zones. We have studies showing that just 2/3 of an ounce of legumes gives you a 7 to 8% reduction in mortality. It's really quite shocking. So, but there are some people, very, very few. I've come across very few people who have been allergic to all legumes, but some are. And if they are, it is possible to, put together a diet using whole grains, a lot of different vegetables, but also nuts and seeds, and especially seeds, which are actually more concentrated in protein, iron, and zinc, and all of those nutrients than are nuts. So seeds like chia seeds and pumpkin seeds and these kinds of seeds can be very useful for that population to help get their intake working.
Thank you. You don't work with people individually, right? I mean, people can't really book a consult with you.
Yeah, now I do occasional consults, but very, very limited, because right now I'm up against a book deadline and spending another month in the Marshall Islands.
Wow.
And then, I've been this year just traveling so much, so I really don't have time, but I do try to make time to answer the odd question people might have, and once in a while when I feel that it's that I could really help someone that's challenged, then I will take on a client.
Thank you. Yeah. What's your new book about, if you're able to tell me?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. This one, I wrote a book way back when called Defeating Diabetes.
Yes.
2003.
I have it. Yeah.
So,
it's a great book.
Yeah. So I'm actually doing another diabetes book, and this one, I'm not sure what it's going to be called, but it may be Defeating Diabetes, What to Eat. And this one's going to incorporate some of the Marshall Islands experience, but this one's going to be almost a step down in terms of complexity, guiding people through exactly what they need to do to reverse insulin resistance, and to understand this process of insulin resistance and how diabetes really is so very reversible in most people, and how to know if it will be reversible. And then lots of recipes, and really trying to guide people through. And it will have absolutely zero oil and zero sugar of any kind.
Yeah, my kind of book.
So, yeah, exactly.
I look forward to reading it when it comes out and interviewing you again, so we can talk about that and the Marshall Islands, which we didn't have time for. We have time for just a few more, questions or myths to debunk. This one I hear, well, you have to eat salmon to get your omega-3. Yeah, everybody knows, because that's how you get your omega-3 fatty acids, essential fatty acids.
Yeah. So, just so people are clear, there are certain fats that you have to consume that you can't make in your body. And the two essential fats are, one is called linoleic acid, and it's an omega-6 fatty acid, and the other is alpha-linolenic acid, and it's an omega-3 fatty acid. Now, technically, alpha-linolenic acid we should be able to convert to what we call these fish fats, which are DHA and EPA. And EPA is icosapentaenoic acid, and DHA is docosahexaenoic acid. And these two fats are really biologically active in the human body, so they're important for brain development and brain function, for the retina of our eyes, for the cell membranes. They're just very, very important fats. So we need to consume, at the very least, alpha-linolenic acid. Excuse me. But alpha-linolenic acid is not always very efficiently converted to EPA and DHA. And there are things that can depress conversion, like having a really high-fat diet can depress conversion. Like eating a lot of trans fatty acids can depress conversion. So there are a number of factors that impair conversion. And so, for example, women convert better than men, young people better than the elderly. But there are dietary factors that can impair conversion. There are certain vitamins and minerals that, are important for making the enzymes responsible for conversion and so on. So technically, vegetarians should be able to convert sufficiently. And we actually have studies showing that over time, vegans seem to be able to maintain this certain amount of DHA. So we are converting. But for some people, conversion is slow and there's some issues there. So I would recommend, this is just what I do, that if you're pregnant or lactating, you may want to take a DHA supplement, maybe even a mix of DHA, EPA. And if you're just kind of a general person wanting to achieve sort of optimal health, you might want to do a DHA, EPA supplement maybe a couple times a week, just to top yourself up a bit. Like you see recommendations for eating fish twice a week. Take a DHA, EPA supplement twice a week. And that would really help to now, this is the really important thing, is again, just like animals don't make essential amino acids, fish don't make EPA and DHA.
Absolutely.
They actually, they come from plants in the sea. These little tiny plants called microalgae. So fish actually get them at some point along the food chain by eating the microalgae. So we take the microalgae and we grow it. We don't even have to rape the ocean. We just grow this stuff, culture it, and then put it in supplement form. So it's not, it's completely vegan. It's easy. There are all kinds of companies that make this stuff. So it's definitely an option for people if they're concerned about that.
Right, and I heard that there is a blood test now that can check what your levels are.
Oh, absolutely.
And I love what you said, that the fish don't produce the omega-3, just like the cows. You don't have to get it that way. You get it from where they get it, which is always from the plant. But people, they've been so indoctrinated with these, meat protein, milk calcium, fish omega-3, they don't even realize that everything came from plants. So just two more questions, because these things I hear a lot from people that are not even necessarily following the healthiest version yet of a plant-based diet, but they worry about these things that they hear, like, for instance, well, we can't eat rice anymore because of the arsenic, and we better not use our air fryer because if we cook potatoes and they're too brown, we're going to get acrylamide poisoning. And, I haven't seen anybody have consequences from those two things yet. So should I be worried? Because I'm still eating rice and I'm still eating air fries. What do you think?
Yeah, so the rice thing is interesting. And I would suggest people go to nutritionfacts.org to look at the latest 2 or 3 videos on where Mike McGregor actually there's a new study that evaluates the amount of arsenic in all kinds of different types of rice, black, brown, red, coming from different places, and so you get an idea. There definitely is arsenic in rice. There's no question, especially from the deep south, Texas and wherever else down in the southern states. Less from California, it seems. So I would probably try to vary my grains a little bit. I know in some cultures rice is consumed 3 times a day, and I think that's probably too much. I would say, eat quinoa and oat groats and camel berries and spelt berries and try to vary those grains. And then when you do have rice, you're not having it every day, and I wouldn't worry about the occasional, consumption or even, having it once a week, something like that.
Wow.
But I am, it's on my radar. I'm a little bit concerned, especially for children who are eating a lot of it, because they got tiny little bodies, and there's no question arsenic is a problem in large ones.
It's just so sad because the rice from the South is my favorite. So
Yeah,
I was hoping for another answer. So what about the air fryer? Because they're very popular now. And the way I look at it, especially, you had mentioned that at the beginning that people that are eating a lot of meat, maybe they need to transition slower. And not everybody can go from a fast food, junk food, carnivorous diet to a whole food plant-based diet. And I find that if I give them tools like an air fryer where they can make delicious crunchy air fries without oil and salt and sugar like traditional French fries, that they're doing better than eating at McDonald's. But a lot of people are saying, oh, you're darkening your food. I mean, are people really dying of acrylamide poisoning because of air fryers? Because the research was always done on meat or vegetables grilled with oil. It hasn't really been done on air fryers, as far as I know.
Yeah, so acrylamide production happens when you cook foods at a high temperature. So anything, was it 248 degrees, I think it is? Anything above 240, so that's not very hot. So any amount of cooking. So for example, taking potatoes, the safest way to cook a potato is by steaming or boiling or something like that.
But excuse me, I don't want to interrupt, but that's also the least delicious way.
Yes, exactly. And so then the next would be to bake, but the more brown, it gets, the more acrylamide will form.
Mm-hmm.
And the issue is, I barbecue. I mean, I have a barbecue. We barbecue in the summertime. I enjoy potatoes on the grill and all of that. So it's not that I don't eat any of that stuff. I definitely do. But I think what people need to understand is any high carbohydrate food that's browned to a great extent, there will be a little more acrylamide forming. Now, the highest acrylamide former is potatoes. So
you're killing me.
It's because of the asparagine. There's a certain amino acid that you need to produce acrylamide that's really high in potatoes. So what I would say again is this doesn't mean you can't have a baked or an air fried or whatever kind of potato, but to vary up, like have some sweet, have a variety of sort of starchy food, so that it's not always the air fried potatoes. That's the treat on Friday night. That's right. You know what I mean? So that you are having a variety. Yeah.
I get it.
And then even if you look at things like, they blacken this imitation coffee. You're blackening barley. You're blackening. Yeah. You get a lot of acrylamide formed in that.
And I love it, but why do acrylamides taste so good?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God.
And again, AJ, we don't really know. We haven't quantified how much acrylamide is actually going to cause cancer. We know that it's a probable carcinogen, but we don't know exactly how much.
But do you think somebody that's eating like an A+ diet like me, except for that, should I worry? Because I always feel that my diet is so good that I'm bulletproof.
So clean. Yeah, and it makes a huge difference, because if your diet is saturated with antioxidants and phytochemicals, and your body is primed to fight any little cancer cells that rise up. You get the broccoli sprouts in there and all the sulforaphane. Yeah, I mean, you can do it. So I think that, you can't not have some enjoyment in your food. And so it's really important. But again, if you have cancer, if you are, fighting a disease, that's where you'll try as much as possible to be varying your foods and making those a little more occasional than every day.
Right,
Yeah,
and it's like you said earlier, sometimes a diet to reverse a disease like heart disease and diabetes needs to be more pristine than one for
absolutely.
somebody that's basically healthy and just trying to prevent one. So, you know,
That's right. And I know when I deal with, I've had clients that have had cancer and I say, we can't afford to add any gasoline to the fire.
mhm.
And those are the patients for whom I will say we're not doing that right now.
Right, excellent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, gosh, I could talk to you forever, and I hope I get to talk to you again when your new book comes out because we didn't get to touch on your wonderful research in the Marshall Islands, which is absolutely fascinating. I just want to end by showing you something. I don't know if you've ever heard of something called a vision board. It's something that we do them on New Year's Eve. Where like if we're trying to create career goals, pictures, and words of things we want to manifest. And I started doing this 10 years ago, and I put Dr. McDougall's picture on it, and I actually ended up getting to speak at his conference 3 times now. So our mutual friend John Pierre had me create a specific one almost a year ago now because he feels that I need to be more like you in terms of a more compassionate human being. And so I just wanted to show you my vision board. I don't know if you can see it, but you are on there, Brenda, with the likes of Mother Teresa, St. Francis, the Dalai Lama, Jesus, Gandhi, Will Tuttle, and John Pierre. So you made it, and you are one of the first things I look at every morning I wake up because I find you so incredibly inspiring, not just as a plant-based advocate, but as a human being, especially as a woman. We need more powerful women role models like you. And I think, if there was a Wonder Woman in the, like I saw that movie and I thought immediately, oh my God, Brenda Davis could have played that. Like if there was a plant-based Wonder Woman, you would be it because you really are. You're I can't say enough about you. You look great, you eat great, you cook great. I mean, you're kind, and you're just really one of the most lovely human beings I've ever met. And I thank you so much for your tireless work on behalf of the animals, the planet, and human health. You really are. You're a triple threat, Brenda. So thank you so much for your time. I hope to see you again soon. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Healthy Living. I'm Chef AJ, and I make healthy taste delicious.